What if I told you most engines that fail early did not miss oil changes at all? They followed the owner's manual perfectly. One interval wastes your money. The other quietly destroys engines while manufacturers stay protected. After years in the shop, I've seen the same pattern over and over. Identical cars, identical oil, wildly different outcomes. Today, I'm exposing what mechanics really think about 5,000 versus 15,000 mile oil changes, and the one rule that actually keeps engines alive. On a cold morning not long ago, a driver pulled into my shop holding his owner's manual like it was evidence. He wasn't angry, he wasn't careless, he had done everything right. Oil changes exactly on schedule, the correct oil grade, dealer stamps, receipts organized by date and mileage. And yet his engine was already showing wear that shouldn't exist at that mileage. As he asked the question I have heard hundreds of times, how is this possible? If I followed the manual, I knew exactly where this conversation was headed. Because the problem wasn't neglect. The problem was belief. Ask 10 drivers how often oil should be changed, and you'll hear the same argument every time. One side swears by 5,000 miles or less. Anything longer, they say, is gambling with your engine. The other side scoffs at that idea and insists modern engines can safely go 15,000 miles or more. Anything shorter is a scam designed to sell oil. Both sides sound confident. Both sides cite experts. Both sides believe the other is being fooled. And both sides are missing the most important part of the story. Here's the detail that immediately breaks the argument if you are willing to sit with it. The exact same engine, built in the same factory, with the same tolerances and the same oil specification, is given completely different oil change intervals depending on where it is sold. In the United States, it might say 5,000 to 7,500 miles. In Europe, that same engine will often be rated for 15,000 miles or 1 year. Same metal, same oil, same engineering. That alone should make you uncomfortable, because oil chemistry does not change when a car crosses a border. This is where most conversations stop, because people rush to defend their side. Americans assume European intervals are reckless. Europeans assume Americans are being upsold. But neither group stops to ask the more dangerous question. If both numbers were truly about engine protection, they would not be so wildly different. That tells you immediately that these intervals are not purely mechanical decisions. They are compromises. To understand why this confusion exists, you have to understand how oil change advice is created. Owner's manuals are not written the way mechanics think. They are written to satisfy regulations, warranties, and global simplicity. They must cover millions of drivers with wildly different habits using a single number. That number must be safe enough to protect the manufacturer legally, simple enough to avoid confusion, and flexible enough to apply in dozens of countries. What it cannot be is precise. That precision is what engines actually need. The 5,000-mile rule in the United States did not come from modern oil science. It came from history. Decades ago, engines ran rich, oil broke down quickly, tolerances were loose, and conventional oil struggled under heat. Back then, changing oil frequently was smart. That habit stuck, even as engines and oil improved. And it stuck because it fit a powerful psychological idea: oil is cheap and engines are expensive. That phrase is technically true, but it also trains drivers to fear extending intervals without ever questioning whether shorter is actually necessary. It also happens to benefit the service industry. More frequent oil changes mean more visits. More visits mean more inspections. More inspections mean more opportunities to recommend work. This does not mean mechanics are dishonest. It means the system rewards caution and repetition. When in doubt, shorter intervals feel safer. On the other side of the world, Europe did not stretch intervals because oil suddenly became magical. They did it because of regulation. Environmental rules limit waste oil. Fleet emissions targets reward lower maintenance costs on paper. Long highway commutes are more common. Engines often have larger oil capacities. European oil intervals are written around ideal conditions, long drives, fully warmed engines, minimal idling. That assumption is rarely stated, but it is built into the math. The problem is that most people do not drive like that. Most drivers take short trips. They idle in traffic. They shut the engine off before the oil fully warms. They drive in extreme heat or cold. They sit at lights. They make 5-minute runs to the store. And oil does not fail because of mileage alone. It fails because of fuel dilution, moisture, acid buildup, and additive depletion. None of those show up on your odometer. This is where both sides of the argument collapse. 5,000 miles can be unnecessarily early for a car that spends its life on the highway. 15,000 miles can be dangerously late for a car that lives on short trips and cold starts. The number by itself tells you almost nothing. Yet drivers cling to it because it feels concrete. Even oil life monitors do not solve this. They estimate oil degradation based on temperature, load, and runtime. They do not measure fuel dilution. They do not detect moisture trapped in oil. They cannot see additive collapse. I have seen oil with plenty of life left that was already chemically exhausted. The monitor did not lie. It just could not see the whole picture. That brings us back to the driver standing in my shop, confused and frustrated. He did exactly what the manual said. He did not abuse the car. He did not skip maintenance. And yet the engine was aging faster than it should. That is when I told him the truth most drivers never hear. Oil change intervals are not rules, they are averages. And engines do not fail from averages. They fail from mismatches between how they are used and how they are maintained. This is where the real conversation begins. Once you accept that neither 5,000 miles nor 15,000 miles is inherently right or wrong, you can finally ask the question that actually matters. What does your engine experience every day? That question leads to answers manuals cannot give you, and it leads directly to the oil change strategy mechanics quietly follow on their own cars. Once you understand that oil change intervals are averages and not precision tools, the next uncomfortable realization hits hard. Most engines that fail early did not fail because owners ignored maintenance. They failed because the maintenance schedule did not match reality. This is where mechanics think very differently from manuals, and it is why the advice they follow on their own cars rarely sounds as confident or absolute as the advice printed in a book. When you ask experienced mechanics how often they change oil in their personal vehicles, the answers are revealing. Almost no one says exactly 5,000 miles. Almost no one says 15,000 miles. Most quietly land somewhere in the middle, then adjust based on how the car is used. That alone should tell you something. People who see engines destroyed every day do not follow slogans. They follow risk management. The reason is simple. Oil does not wear out at a fixed mileage. It degrades based on stress. And stress comes from conditions, not distance. Short trips are one of the most damaging conditions oil can face. Every time you start an engine cold and shut it off before the oil reaches full temperature, moisture stays trapped inside the crankcase. Fuel that slips past piston rings does not evaporate. Acids do not burn off. Over time, that contamination overwhelms the oil's additives long before the odometer hits any magic number. Direct injection engines make this worse. Fuel is sprayed directly into the combustion chamber at high pressure, which increases fuel dilution in the oil. That thins viscosity and reduces protection. Turbocharged engines add another layer of stress. Oil is exposed to extreme heat at the turbo bearings, which accelerates oxidation and additive breakdown. Add frequent idling or stop-and-go traffic, and oil degradation speeds up dramatically. None of this is hypothetical. Oil analysis labs see it constantly. Two cars with the same engine and the same oil can produce wildly different results at the same mileage. One sample comes back healthy, the other is already exhausted. The difference is not miles, it is usage. That is why a blanket interval can never protect every engine equally. This is also why oil life monitors can be misleading if treated as authority. They are helpful tools, but they estimate oil condition based on algorithms, not chemical analysis. They assume normal operating conditions. They cannot see fuel dilution, moisture accumulation, or additive collapse. Mechanics know this, which is why they treat oil life percentages as guidance, not permission. This brings us to the situations where a 5,000-mile interval actually makes sense. Short daily trips under 10 miles, frequent cold starts, heavy city driving, high ambient temperatures, turbocharged or direct injection engines, small oil capacities. In these scenarios, oil is punished quickly. Changing it early isn't wasteful. It is protective. This is why fleet vehicles like taxis, police cars, and delivery vehicles often run shorter intervals even with full synthetic oil. Their engines live in the worst possible conditions. Now let us talk about the other extreme. There are cases where long intervals can be safe, mostly highway driving. Long trips that keep oil at full temperature for extended periods. Naturally aspirated engines, large oil capacities, high-quality full synthetic oil, minimal idling. In this environment, moisture burns off, fuel dilution stays low, and additives last longer. This is why 15,000-mile intervals can work in parts of Europe where daily driving often involves sustained highway speeds. But here is the critical part most drivers miss. The moment those ideal conditions change, the long interval becomes risky. One winter of short trips, a job change that adds traffic, a turbocharged upgrade, a few months of heavy idling. Oil doesn't get a warning before it starts failing, and the damage it allows doesn't announce itself until much later. Color doesn't help you either. Many drivers panic when oil turns black quickly, assuming it is worn out. In reality, dark oil often means detergents are working, holding contaminants in suspension. What matters is viscosity stability, fuel dilution percentage, and remaining additive reserve. Two oils can look identical and be in completely different states of health. This is why mechanics don't argue about numbers. They ask questions. How do you drive? How long are your trips? Do you idle? Is the engine turbocharged? How much oil does it hold? Those answers shape the interval far more than any sticker on the windshield. By this point, the debate between 5,000 miles and 15,000 miles should feel small. Both numbers are oversimplifications. They are not lies, but they are not strategies either. They exist because simplicity is easier than explanation. But engines don't live in simple conditions. And this is where the final shift happens. Once you stop asking which number is right and start asking what your engine actually experiences, the oil change conversation changes completely. Because there is one rule mechanics trust more than any mileage number. Once you understand that rule, you will understand why some engines reach 300,000 miles, while others do not make it past 120,000 miles, even when the owners swear they did everything right. By the time a mechanic has seen enough engines torn apart, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Engines do not fail because of a single missed oil change. They fail because of years of small decisions that did not match how the engine was actually being used. This is where the final piece of the oil change debate comes together, and it is the part most manuals will never explain clearly. There is one rule experienced mechanics trust more than any mileage number, oil life monitor, or service sticker. Change oil based on how you drive, not how far you drive. Mileage is just a clock. Conditions are the real enemy. Once you understand that, everything else starts to make sense. Think about two identical cars, same engine, same oil, same year. One is driven on long highway trips, warming fully every day. The other is used for short commutes, school runs, and traffic jams. After 7,000 miles, those two engines are living completely different lives internally. One has burned off moisture, stabilized fuel dilution, and kept additives intact. The other has trapped water, diluted oil with fuel, and slowly eaten away at its protective chemistry. Treating those two engines with the same oil interval is not fair. It is dangerous. This is why blind adherence to any number is the real problem. Not 5,000 miles, not 15,000 miles. The danger is trusting averages over reality. Manufacturers have to write manuals that work across continents, climates, and driving styles. They must protect warranties and meet regulations. That forces them to give simplified guidance. It does not mean the guidance is optimal for every driver. Many engineers know this. Some will admit it quietly. Manuals give a safe average. The rest is up to the owner. But most owners never realize there is more to the story. They follow the book perfectly and still end up with timing chain wear, oil consumption, turbo failure, or ring sticking. Not because they were careless, but because the interval did not match their usage. The smartest oil strategy is flexible. It changes when your driving changes. Winter short trips may justify shorter intervals. Summer highway commuting may allow longer ones. Adding a turbo, towing, or extended idling should immediately shorten your oil schedule. Ignoring those changes is how oil quietly loses the ability to protect. Oil analysis exists for a reason. It is the only way to know exactly what is happening inside your engine. Labs consistently show that some oils are still healthy at 7,000 miles, while others are worn out by 6,000. Very few survive 15,000 miles unless conditions are nearly perfect. This is not opinion. It is chemistry. And here is the irony most people never consider. Oil is one of the cheapest components in your entire car, yet it protects the most expensive parts. Saving a few dollars by stretching intervals too far can cost thousands in repairs later. Timing chains do not fail suddenly. Bearings do not spin overnight. Rings do not stick in one drive. Damage accumulates slowly, silently, while the oil struggles to do a job it is no longer chemically capable of doing. This is why experienced mechanics quietly choose the middle ground. Often around 7,000 to 8,500 miles, adjusted up or down based on conditions. Not because it sounds good, but because it minimizes risk. It balances modern oil chemistry with real-world driving. It gives engines a buffer instead of pushing limits. The real takeaway is not a number. It is a mindset. Stop asking how often you should change oil. Start asking what your engine has been through. Cold starts, short trips, heat, load, idle time, turbo stress, oil capacity. Those answers matter more than anything printed on a sticker. Once you think this way, oil changes stop being an argument and start being a strategy. You stop guessing. You stop following fear-based advice or marketing-driven intervals. You make decisions that fit your engine, your driving, and your goals for the car. That is why some engines quietly reach 300,000 miles with no drama, while others burn oil and rattle themselves apart far earlier. The difference is rarely luck. It is understanding. So before your next oil change, ask yourself one honest question. Not how many miles are on the oil, but what has that oil actually endured? The answer to that question will protect your engine better than any number ever could. And if this changed how you think about maintenance, there is a lot more you have not been told yet. Subscribe, because the next video exposes another normal habit that silently shortens engine life and shows why most drivers never realize it until it is too late.